Fresh and
All right, welcome back to another episode of Fresh and Buds. I am your host, Tommy Fresh, and you are all of my buds, and I am joined by a bud today, Mr. Hemal Patel. You might know him as Zeus on Discord. You might know him as Hammurabi TCG. He's become a great bud to both me and Gary over at the Bud Rush Bellow, and I thought it would be awesome to have him on to talk a little bit about the secondary market, get to know him a little bit. This is something that we have never really talked about on the show before, so hey, why not bring in the experts? I'm an idiot, right? I don't know any of this stuff, so got to bring him in. But how are you doing, Himmel?
I'm doing good, man. You're more entrenched in the Hammurabi TCG than most people know. Like I don't know if most people know, but during the Battle Hard New Jersey stream, we had an advertisement that we had made for the Hammurabi TCG, and the voice of Hammurabi himself was Mr. Tommy Fresh over here.
It sure was, yeah. I mean, we are the same person, I guess, and, and it was cool. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but that was a lot of fun, and I think it turned out great. So, but before we get to all that, I gotta do what I do in the beginning here. Talk a little bit about the Patreon, which you can find in the show notes, which helps keep the lights on, the mics hot, get access to the Patreon exclusive Buds Discord channel called the Romping Club. You get a Romping Club membership card. You get some access to some pack openings from the Bud Rush Bellow that we don't get to on the Bud Rush Bellow. You get access to some bonus eps as well. It's a good way to support the show. Obviously, definitely not required, but very much appreciated. And then I also want to shout out the Bud Rush Bellow, which I mentioned already, with Mr. Viz, aka Gary. And it is a fun live show that we do on YouTube, 9:30 Eastern on Wednesdays. And it is a blast. We get pretty silly over there. So please check it out. And if you're on the YouTube right now, listening or watching this right now, give it the old like, comment, subscribe. Trying to get those sub numbers up a little bit now that I'm doing the podcast in video, which is, I'm here in the future now. And and then I also want to give a shout out to, I was on a Buds podcast this week called Steelblade Showtime, featuring the Buds, Brendan and Derek. Very cool show. You get they kind of grilled me a little bit about some Leviah stuff, and it was a lot of fun. So check that out. And also coming up, Owl Central Games in Millersville, Pennsylvania, is also going to be having a 1K on, I think it's the 25th of February. I will be there hanging out, playing some games, intimidating with Rhino, I think. But that's it. Now we talk to him. First of all, how you doing? You've been traveling a lot lately. What's going on?
I've been traveling a lot. It's been good. Just got back from the Calling Indy last weekend, and it's been a ball. I do most of the events here in North America. My little paddle around to some of the foreign events, but it was a great weekend. Got to meet a lot of the buds. Got to meet Gary. Got to meet you yourself. Got to meet a bunch of other content creators, and my fellow Bazaar compatriots. Got them the singles they need.
Yeah. Well, that's the cool thing, right? So for context, I think, gosh, I mean, when I first started into the game, and Gary did, we kind of got into the games around the same time, and we were kind of like buying cards, from people we met on the Purple Discord or whatever, and we had both kind of bought cards from you, and Gary just is like, you're his go-to guy. I open a lot of sealed product just because like I gotta, and I'm crazy, but when I need singles I reach out to you, and it's just kind of funny because Gary was like, oh, Zeus has this, Zeus has that. I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, like, Zeus is great, he's the best. And then all of a sudden one day Gary goes, do you want to do some voice acting? And I was like, yeah, sure. And next thing I know, we're chatting with you, not about buying singles, but doing voice acting for an ad. And it was pretty cool. Do you want to tell us why or what your thoughts were behind the ad that played at the Battle Hard in New Jersey?
So I was actually doing like me and Ethan are good friends, and I was talking to Ethan. And Ethan's like, yeah, I'm trying to make an advertisement spots for a bunch of people and like stores and stuff like that if they want to do something during the Battle Harden. And I was like, well, I mean, it doesn't hurt, get my name out there a little bit more, just make a cute cutesy ad and stuff like that. So then I was talking to Ethan. He's like, I can make it for you, and we can work something out that way. So that's how it first started. And I was like, it's not a bad idea. Get the Bazaar's name out there a little bit more, and try to see, because a lot of more people were going to watch those VODs after the fact, and it might help out then. Plus live viewers and stuff like that, and you know I could garner some support in that way, in the sense that the brand grows more. So we started off with that idea, and then the idea behind the ad we had was to make it like the internet historian memes, or you have like it's just like really wonky editing, and like it's like really cute and fun. And so we start off with that, and we're like, yeah, it would be interesting if we made him like a mob boss, and we had that Futurama thing in the background where it's like the Italian mob boss, and he has the two henchmen, and one of them has a clamp for an arm. So we're like who has a good Italian mob boss voice? And I asked Gary, and he's like Tommy, just message Tommy. Just message Tommy. I was like, all right. So I sent you a message, and then once you sent me that first draft, I was like, oh, this is absolutely perfect.
It was a ton of fun. I love like challenges like that. I haven't done a lot of any like voice acting. I did something for a Dead Summer Art. I was Oldham. That's definitely a different vibe than the Donbot from Futurama. But I love Futurama. And as soon as you said Futurama, I was like, damn, now I gotta watch Futurama again because now I'm getting so nostalgic. It was a lot of fun. Now we're gonna get to Hammurabi TCG and what's going on with that, but I do want to kind of start at the beginning a bit, right? When did trading card games come into your life?
So like the creators of Flesh and Blood, I started playing trading card games with YuGiOh back in the day. So I started YuGiOh when I was in high school, like late middle school, in like 2010, 2009 ish. And I skedaddled. I had my Blue Eyes White Dragon deck. I didn't win any single matches, but as time went on, I was like, I'm gonna get a little bit competitive. So around like 2011, 2012, I got competitive. I started topping the equivalent of callings in Yu-Gi-Oh, which is called YCSs, and I got really competitive into that. But then the problem with Yu-Gi-Oh is power creep. So it started to get very combo-y, very, not the best player wins, but the player who opens the best wins, which is at that point, it starts to teeter off for me because I want to try to outplay my opponent, not be outplayed by the deck itself, like where I had no control. No matter what I do, I still lose, right? And so I started to teeter off Yu-Gi-Oh around like 2017-ish, 2016-ish. So then I shifted over to Magic, and kind of the same happened in there. So I got in at like the end of the golden age, from what I was told, for Magic and Modern, where you had like Jund and this and that, but once they started to wane off and all these Modern Horizon sets came out, and everything became just no holes barred, I started to wane from that too. And then COVID hit, so didn't really have a chance to go play in any tournaments. And then one random day in July of 2020, I walked into my LGS, and shout out to Heroes Collectibles in Houston, Texas. But I walked in, and my good friend Tyler there, he runs the front, and he goes, hey, there's this new game that came out. I have a box of it. Do you want to open it? I was like, sure. What is it? He's like, oh, it's Flesh and Blood. I'm like, that sounds gnarly. And he handed me a box of Crucible of War, and he goes, here, open it. And I opened up a Skullhorn. I'm like, oh, this is like cool. This is like an ultimate rare from Yu-Gi-Oh! As the cold foiling and the ultimate rare from Yu-Gi-Oh! Are very similar. It's like the stamped metallic. And so that, instantly lit like a nostalgic fuse for me. And I was like, you know what? I want to dig in, and bought a bunch of Crucible of War boxes and went on into Fab from there.
Yeah, I mean, those cold foils really do kind of bring people in. Now, I gotta ask. So you kind of touch on it there with like the cold foiling and then the ulti rares that you're mentioning, Yu-Gi-Oh, which first of all, you playing until 2017. You held on pretty long for Yu-Gi-Oh.
I tried. I was looking for a lifeguard. I was looking for someone to pull me out. No one pulled me out, so I got stuck, and I was like, alrighty.
Well, we're glad you're here now. So, but you mentioned these kind of ultra rare cold foil. Were you always into the collectability side of things as well?
Not exactly. So in Yu-Gi-Oh, there's this stigma that a lot of pro players have, and it's that their decks are always max rarity, highest rarity physically possible. Everything is as shiny as possible. And so when you grow up young and you're thinking like that, you're just like, oh, I want to make my deck as shiny as possible, and you inadvertently start collecting.
Yeah.
It's not that you're it's not that you're going out to do that. It's just you're like, oh, I want the best rarity version of this. I'm just going to pick it up, and then your collection just amasses that way. So the best person that I can compare that to in Fab is actually a good friend of mine, Nick Butcher.
Okay.
Nick Butcher, his he plays on the Spellground mats, which are like the Yu-Gi-Oh, epitome for mat. And then he has his deck; it's all high rarity, and he has his cold foil equipment and this and that. And it's the same thing, where it's just like as Yu-Gi-Oh players were ingrained that you have to have the max rarity deck and this and that. So I just naturally went. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go get my cold foil equipment because there's no other option for me.
Yeah, I mean, well, I get it, we want to bling. We can't help it. I think it's
Yeah,
human nature. We want
yeah,
to bling things out,
yeah,
and if you have the disposable income, why not?
yeah,
I'm not like that. Well, I would love to be that person, right? I would
yeah.
love to bling out, but I do not treat my decks correct. I'm like, like riffle shuffling like as hard as I can, and just like mashing it together.
Mashing them in.
I'm not that guy, I can't take care of things. There's something wrong with me, but but I totally get it, right? And I could see how that would kind of make you inadvertently a collector. Now,
Right.
TCGs have become part of your professional life now at this point, right?
Kind of, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're dealing in with it, and
yeah.
hey, you're making ads, right? That's pretty cool. When did you know that you wanted to kind of dip your toes into that side of things?
So I was always, once again, everything happens inadvertently, but because I had all that collection in Yu-Gi-Oh, and I had the high rarity stuff. Sometimes, like in Yu-Gi-Oh, the power creep would happen, and your high rarity stuff becomes, unusable because it's just been power crept. So you would need to sell it and retransform that money into something else. So I was always into the buying and selling portion from there. When I got to Fab and I saw like all these new high rarity cards I wanted to get and this and that, I thought, well, I could try to buy and sell and try to just use the same money I have and turn it into something else, and use the profits from that to buy a card and then just go from there. That's actually how Hammurabi TCG started. It was mostly from me wanting to not have to pay for a single card. I wanted to play every card I could. I wanted to play the game, but I wanted to play for free.
Yeah.
And as I mean, every small things have big beginnings, or I think I messed up that quote. But anyways, but I was trying to initially help the community at the same time as help myself,
hmm
and it just grew into the singles thing that it is now.
Yeah. Well, it's ideally, we would all love to kind of like stay at that net, kind of
Yeah,
like positive, or even like even. You just want to stay even, and
yeah,
I mean, sure, you're always going to have that initial investment. You have to, right? You have to get
yeah.
some stuff into your collection to be able to trade up for things. So no, that's pretty cool that's kind of how it started. And I think I the quote was probably close enough. We'll
I
just
was I tried, man.
we're just gonna say it was right. So, but now how long have you like been like on the other side of the booth? Because I saw you at the Calling Indianapolis. You're behind the booth at was it Magnolia?
Yeah. So me and my the friend who owns Magnolia Games, his name is Spencer. We're good friends, and we met before the first American calling. So I've been doing every single calling except I think two I've done in America that there's been. So we started with the Tales of Aria one. Um, Me and him had like I've been doing booths for Yu-Gi-Oh prior. Like I would have local stores hire me out to be their buyers and stuff like that because I just knew how what the cards were worth, and I'm a good talker. So they're like, just we'll stick you up there. You look pretty enough, he can be a half booth babe, and we'll get you to attract people. So I was like, okay. So I talked to my friend Spencer, and he's like, hey, I'm thinking about doing a booth for the Calling. This was during the Tales of Aria pre-release. So he's like, do you know like what goes into doing a booth in this? So we talked, and we had our first booth then, and he basically, he hires me out to work for him, and he's a good friend, so I just help him out, and it ends up being a dynamic like that. But basically, for almost every single Fab event I've been to, I've been behind the booth. Basically,
What?
I did Vegas, Dallas, Orlando the first year they had it. Then last year I did everything but Indy, and then this year I started with Indy, and then I'll be in Baltimore as well,
Sounds like you might be in Auckland as well.
and Auckland as well too. Yeah, I leave in a week, and hopefully, I get to meet some people and hang out with some, overseas friends and stuff like that.
It's very cool. So it's for the listeners, we had never met face to face, him and me, but we had
Yeah.
always chatted, and obviously we had done the ad together. And I am at the Calling Indianapolis, and I'm looking to pick up some snags because they're pretty cheap right now, and I think it's going to be good when people are playing a lot of Razor Reflexes. Don't take my word for it. In this is actually my buddy Jim actually turned me on to. He's like, Snag's really good, I'm like, actually, you're right. But I'm like, oh, I go to Magnolia. I'm like, how many snags you guys got? And all of a sudden, I hear from behind the booth, I hear the Bazaar's got what you need. So, and I'm like, oh my God, how you doing, man? So him, like, if you haven't watched the ad, and I'll post the link for it in the show notes, but that was the whole thing. The Bazaar's got what you need. And I thought that was so cool. It's like, oh my God, that's Hammurabi TCG? No way. So it was cool to see, get the, that's the beauty of this game, putting a face to
Yeah.
the name, right? And getting to meet people. So you've been on the other side of the booth, you do some singles stuff, you do some secondary market stuff. Do you get to play often?
I do. So I get to play once a week, basically, because my actual job, I work in legal. So I'm super busy all the time, but I get to eke out one armory a week. So same store I mentioned prior, Heroes Collectibles, we have them every Wednesday. So I get to go. We have a rotating format, so I get to play all my decks there, and pretty much. And then when we have ProQuest, RTNs, and stuff like that, I'll play as well. I'm not that bad, to be honest.
What?
I've topped two ProQuests, and I was just like, whew.
Well, you have to know at least what cards are good, right?
Oh, yeah.
From what you do. So, like, I would assume you're pretty good, and you were a good Yu-Gi-Oh player. So, I think
Yeah.
it all equals to good, maybe better than me, most likely, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
But
The Texas scene is killer there because we have the Cole Foil control guys, we have Dalen Mack, we have
mhm.
Brendan Patrick, Brody. So it's just oh
Savage
man,
down there, yeah, yeah.
oh it's the Savage Lands, as you would know as a fellow Reinhardt player.
Yeah, well, I gotta say, I mean, I relate, and I've said it on the show plenty of times. New Jersey's also pretty brutal, but we got some. They're nice. That's good, right? They're nice, and they don't take the armories too seriously, at least anymore. Now that it's easier to get to more events, which is good. Now, you mentioned that Flesh and Blood came in the picture when you bought the Crucible War box. Was it just a snowball effect after that, or was it like, oh, that was cool, I have these cards now, we'll see what happens, or when did you really know it was like the hooks were in with Flesh and Blood?
It was I want to say it was the same thing. I'm not sure if you've seen How I Met Your Mother. But you know that scene where Barney holds up his baby for the first time, and he's like, "You're my everything." That's how I felt when I held up my coal foil ether conduit. I'm like, "You are my everything," and it just latched me in, and I just started going in. I was like, I wonder if I can make a deck from Crucible of War, and I found out the hard way that you cannot because there's not enough cards in there, and it's an ancillary set. So then at that time, WTR and ARC weren't there wasn't an unlimited out, so it was like really hard to get, and the prices weren't as egregious as they are now, but they were still relatively high for a brand new game. It was like $200 a box. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to spend $200 a box. So, I mean, I should have, but that's neither here nor there. But I was like, I'll wait for the unlimited, and then the unlimited sets came out, and I started playing, and it just instantly latched me on. And I was just like, it's the attrition of the game that got me. Because in Yu-Gi-Oh, I was always like a control, stun, attrition type of player. Like I want to try to get incremental advantage. And same thing in Magic. I played Jund, which is just tries to 1-for-1 or tries to get advantage using one card against their one card until you get to a state of the game where there's both players have nothing, and then you just try to eke out a win from there.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what I love, because in Fab it's essentially the same thing. It's like you have this incremental advantage, and you're trying to get tempo and try to play your cards correctly, try to get the most out of them, and go from there. So just transferring it all over. I'm just hoping this game doesn't become like a combo thing where like every deck's a Kano.
Yeah.
But
Oh God.
it's been good so far. So just along for the ride.
Yeah, yeah, I'm totally with you. I'm the same way. I love the attrition, and I fear the combo. Because
Yeah.
like you said with Yu-Gi-Oh, right? It's how you open. If you open the best, the game's over. Doesn't matter.
Exactly.
I don't. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like things not mattering matters, if that makes sense. Like it matters
100%.
to
Yeah.
players because it's a fun factor thing, right? So, pretty cool. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the health of the game from a market perspective in a bit, but what are your thoughts on the health of the game currently for players?
I think personally the game is in a good spot. Basing it off of two things. One, you can technically kind of win with any hero in a sense, right? Like you saw Boltons at top tables at ProQuest, and you see all these Bolton savants everywhere. Ethan's running around with his Levia list. I'm sure you are as
Yeah.
well. And like all these heroes, all 15 of them. I think the only one that has a tough time is Arachne, but that's just because there's just not enough cards in their pool right now. So you're just trying to figure out how you can maneuver that deck. But in my eyes, I see every hero being viable, which is a good and a bad thing. It's good in the sense that every person doesn't have like their only deck that's just like, oh, it's irrelevant now. This format, you can't play it. Even if you try to win, you can't. There's the opportunity for everybody to win, but the skill level is very high
Yeah.
in this format. And that's why you see repeat winners like Michael Hamilton, like Tariq Patel, like all these guys that are at the top tables all the time. But and you see also like reoccurring names like Charles Dunn. Charles Dunn, I think he lives up there up north, and he's won a couple battle hardens and got second at this most recent calling. And you see these reoccurring names because the skill level is so high. And in those types of formats, I feel like the game is in its healthiest because it rewards you for playing whatever you're best at. But also, if you're playing something that everybody else is playing, if you're really good at it, it rewards you even more because you'll win the matchups. You know the lines. You know when to block, when not to block. You know which resources to dump when. Like I'm gonna block my Oakenult here because I don't care because I have X resources and X pitch stack coming up later in the game that'll win me the game.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And sure, they did some bans and stuff like that, but there's always going to be
Yeah.
bans. There's always going to be shakeups. It's like impossible. Like everybody's like, oh, Oldham's oppressive, and then they get a ban, and then Oldham wins the calling right after. Or no, it could like 5 of the top 8 were in the top 8 of the calling. Icelander won because Michael Hamilton, of course. But
Yeah.
and then Bravo sneaks out a win at Battle Harden over in Europe over the weekend.
Italy, I think, yeah.
Yeah. So like, it's all crazy. I think anything could really work right now. It's just a matter of what did you bring and what did you play against during the Swiss rounds, which is a good thing. Now, where do you see the game going in the next 5 years? Because it's off to a really hot start, right? Sputtered a little bit with COVID, but what can you do? And then we're on the eve of Outsiders being a huge release.
I see the game going well. I just see 3 major things they need to address. And if they address these, then I think the game is completely fine. The first one is intro level product. They need a cheaper classic battle intro level deck, which they're seeing. I see them with those History Pack 1 Blitz decks, but I want to see how they go from there. And I feel like just having all your starter products centralized around Blitz is a problem in itself. Like you need to have like let's say like a CC starter deck or like a UPF starter deck. Like I understand it adds more products and could cause more fatigue and stuff like that. And it's the same complaint Magic players have, like, oh, you have like 50 million different things coming out every time a set comes out.
Yeah.
But just having like just the option, like imagine a classic battle with 2 CC decks, right? Like you can charge $40 for that and get away with it because it's 2 full-fledged CC decks, right? But it gives a new player an opportunity to like learn other formats straight off the bat versus just going straight into Blitz. Because I've seen this problem at my locals where new players get in and they get into Blitz and then it's hard for them to adapt to the CC mentality because they learn that because in Blitz life is less of a resource, more of like a thing that you have to guard very well.
Mm-hmm.
But in CC, you can take a full swing turn, so you can pivot and then try to, just tempo them out the rest of the game by like ripping their hand apart every single turn.
Yeah.
But it's hard to learn that concept if you're not playing CC at all, because a lot of these new players, they are all Blitz only and this and that, and that's what I've noticed. Like at our turnouts or our tournaments, you'll see the same CC grinders that come all the time that are just CC players, but they also play Blitz. But I haven't seen the inverse of it, where you see Blitz grinders who also play CC, which I feel like it's because there's no starter product there. The second thing would be non-foil fables. I feel that with Fab 2.0, it's been great. It's been fantastic for the game, having all these legendaries easily available and lower rarities and high rarity versions for the collectors to chase. And same thing with fables and these marvels and stuff like that. It's cool. But the non-foil fabled, I feel like if they're emphasizing tournament play, it should have been non-foil fabled, coal foil fabled, and no rainbow foil. Because that way, these pro players, if the card becomes played, and you can see that it'll be relatively cheap if it's not a reprint card like Command and Conquer, like with like Blood of the Try or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You can have these reprints of not reprints in the sense, like these reprints will be chase cards like the $400 Command and Conquer, but like Blood of the Try at $40 for a brand new fabled, like a non-foil version, and you can see these competitive players play them in their decks, not worry about having to get DQ'd and stuff like that. So creating these non-foil variants for tournament play, especially if they're like forcing people, not forcing, but emphasizing people to go the tournament route, the Pro Tour route, all these Pro Quest, RTNs and stuff like that. You want to funnel them into these higher level events, but then you punish them for playing the cards that you print.
Yeah.
Like Nitro Mechanoid is another example. That only comes coal foil, and it comes rainbow foil, and it comes marble.
Mm-hmm.
There's no non-foil. Like, why would you not print a non-foil? So then these people who want to play the deck, like the Dragons, how they were in non-foil, they can play the deck without having to worry about, burrito inside their deck or something, like just folding up.
Yeah.
Make them a DQ.
Here's
the last.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, before you leave to the last one, I do have a question about that. Right?
Sure.
Do you think, right? So let's say they had done. So hard to find those, right? The hot ticket fable right now because it's really good in these control decks, right? And do you think that if it was available in non-foil, all of a sudden becomes a little bit more accessible, right? And maybe we see more, maybe not more accessible, but stark difference between the coal foil and the non-foil, I think, would be greater than maybe the rainbow foil.
That's what I think personally, because the foiling in itself provides like a premium for players. Like, oh, it's shiny, right? So therefore it's worth more. But the non-foil would, I feel like right now, hard to find though as of mid-February, it's around $500 for a rainbow foil copy. Now, if there was a non-foil version, I feel like the non-foil would be 400 at this set, 400, 350 at this point in time. Yes, it's from an out of print set. Yes, it's the first fable, so it holds a premium in itself in that right. But having a non-foil version deters some people from getting the rainbow foil version and stuff. You know what I mean? Like chasing after. But the issue with Heart is that the highest rarity version of it is the Lotus of the game. It's the chase card. So it's like 6, 10, 12, whatever $1,000 it is for whatever condition you want. So Heart is very awkward with this because there's no other high level to get there. But like stuff like Blood of Jakai, Guardian of Valahai, Corsham, Library, those are much easier to see that, oh, okay, if there's a non-foil version, you can play it in competitive decks and be worth relatively less, and your difference is like 50-60 bucks.
Yeah. I mean, I guess Heart was probably a bad example, but like, let's say if we saw another Fabled with the playability of Heart printed, we get the cold foil and then a non-foil. Do you think that if people started playing a lot of the non-foil because it's a little bit easier and like people aren't worried about being DQ'd or anything like we just mentioned, does that drive the price of the cold foil because all of a sudden it's showing up in more lists because it is available in non-foil?
I think so. And then obviously the non-foil would drop at a much easier rate
Mm-hmm.
than the cold foil. So I feel like it indirectly helps both parties in
Mm-hmm.
that sense. That like the players get their version where they don't have to worry about getting kicked out of a tournament that they spend money to fly to, that they spent money on their deck, that they spent to test and time and this and that. And at the same time, these collectors always want to see their investments go up.
Mm-hmm.
So once they see the high demand there, the chase goes up, and vice versa. Like for example, if there was a non-foil Marvel CNC, right? I mean, not Marvel, Fabled CNC.
Yeah.
Maybe the cold foil version would have been $500, $600, $700 by now, and the non-foil version would be $200. But it's this like balancing act that happens a lot of the time.
Yeah. Then so and sorry for interrupting, but I just wanted to get that out of there before you get to your last point. But yeah. What was your last point?
My last point was that I want to see the game address reprints properly. So in the sense, like all these decks, they either need okay, so Fab has two routes that they can take. You can go the YuGiOh route, and you can go the Magic route. So the YuGiOh route is power creep everything. CNC, here's CNC 2.0. Art of War, here's Fart of War. I saw the meme on Twitter today, and I was just like, oh, this is hilarious. But like, just something that just makes the other version obsolete. Then on the other end, you could go the Magic route, where it's like you have these reprint sets, and you reprint all these sets, but not history pack wise. Like more on the sense of like, here's a curated list of 100 cards, and we're reprinting them in the set that you can get, and it's in stores for a limited time. There's only one or two runs, and then after that, it's gone. Right? It's just a reprint to lower the price and increase the supply. So something like that. YuGiOh does that as well with Megatins, but what they do in those Megatins is that they take a card, let's say Command and Conquer, since we're just talking about it, it's easier. They'll reprint Command and Conquer in a different rarity. But Flab, it's very hard for them to do that. So YuGiOh, you have Ultimate Rare, Super Rare. Super Rare is where it's just the image is foil. Ultra Rare is where the image is foil and the text is golden. You have Secret Rare where it's kind of like a whitish foil, like a prismatic rainbowy effect.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Ultimate Rare, which is similar to cold foil. So let's say Command and Conquer came off in a super rarity where only the image is foil, and then in the Megatin they reprint it in the prismatic shiny version. So there's like a different higher end version or a lower end version, but there's more supply of it. I feel like that's difficult to do with Fab because you only have two foil printings, right? You have cold foil, you have rainbow foil, and then you have non-foil. So it's really difficult to teeter, especially since every set has either the card in rainbow, non, or cold. So it becomes awkward. So then the other option is the Magic route, where you have like Modern Masters types of sets, where you have reprint sets of curated list of cards that you want to release into supply so you can have these prices drive down a little bit. But with how they handle reprint equity on their cards, like Art of War, E-Strike, Tunic now, with Tunic hitting almost $250, $300, it becomes really hard for a new player to be like, I want to get in and play. And they're like, well, I'm at a disadvantage now because I have to play Blossom of Spring while my opponent has a Tunic. He's going to get a resource every 3 turns, and he's playing Oldhim, and I'm playing and I'm only going to get a resource once, and I just have to deal with it. So just having those opportunities that they can, create, like I don't know what they would do because they've already done the white border route, and reprinting a white border card again, a white border would be a problem.
Yeah.
Or I feel like the best route that they could do is make different art versions of it and, go that way. Or if they want to create like a rainbow border, like, here's a red border to it, like something, just some differentiation of like a tier list, basically.
Yeah, and I think it is a matter of probably doing it smart, right? I play a lot of Magic, so I remember like Modern Masters. I believe the first Modern Masters, even the second one maybe, were like kind of hits, right? And I don't think they didn't like dive the price, but it kind of helped the prices of some cards. I think the main one that I'm thinking of was Tarmogoyf, right? That
Yeah.
was like an insanely expensive card at the time. They reprint it with new art, and it kind of drove it down a bit. It was just a little bit more, available. So something like that, because we don't want these cards to be worth nothing, right? And
Yeah.
because then we run into the issue with the collectors, and and we're seeing a huge fallout in Magic with that market right now. Things just
Exactly.
I found like full art like Path to Exiles the other day, right? And I was like, oh, I wonder how much they are. Looked on, I was like, oh, 50 cents. I was like, oh, okay. It does. I was like, it was kind of a bummer, but we don't
Yeah.
want that in Fab. So yeah, I guess I guess we're not the ones to make those decisions, but hopefully, they do it
Oh
right.
man. Maybe I can nudge some feathers when I go next week into Auckland and be like, "Hey, man, I have this idea."
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, listen, I got a couple other things I'd like you to tell them. I'll tell you off air, but but before we get to the fresh faves, I just want to ask, what was it like to work with such amazing voice actors on your ad?
Oh, it was fantastic. Gary gave me the clamps, and he was great about it. I was like, "Hey, do you have like a line you want to say repeatedly, kind of like a catchphrase?" He goes, "Can I say or you get the clamps several times?" And he sent me like 90 variations of him saying, "Oh, I'm gonna give you the clamps," and it's just like high pitch, low pitch, like guttural voices. I'm like, Jesus, Gary, what did you do?
Yeah, that's what I've learned with Gary is that you give him a task, he does it. He's all in. I just love about him. But can you give us a little bit of a origin story on the Hammurabi TCG? Just the name, what made you choose it?
Sure. So I started Hammurabi TCG with Monarch Unlimited release, right? Monarch first edition was so expensive, and I was like, I'm gonna buy a bunch of cases of Monarch Unlimited, mostly because I wanted to get my own set to play with, so I could play Prism because that was the hero I was most interested in from the set. I was like, but I don't want to spend $1,000 on a Footsteps. I don't want to spend $1,500 on a library. But at the time, I remember I bought these off Star City Games, and they had cases for $300 shipped, $305 shipped. All first edition cases were like 1,800. I'm like, this seems much better of a value proposition. So I just bought a bunch of cases, and I was just like, I'm gonna keep my own set and then sell the rest and see what happens. And I started doing that, and I moved on to WTR and ARC. I started partnering with stores locally, and then I started partnering with stores all around the country. And eventually, it grew to what it is now, where I partner with over 75 LGSs across the country, and I buy product from all of them across the country, from different countries and everything. I basically supply singles to like what 30-40% of the world
Wow.
for Fab in general. Yeah, so I do most big countries. I did a lot in the Brazil. I did a lot for Mexico. I did a lot in Sweden and Poland. Done a lot to Australia and New Zealand itself. So it grew just out of just sheer, just I guess I'll open some more packs. And
Yeah.
I started selling cards, and it just went from there. But the name itself was based on the Fabled, right? So I was looking at the heart and the eye, and I was like, what's a cool name I can come up with? So Hammurabi TCG came from the phrase from Hammurabi's law that says an eye for an eye.
Hmm.
So my logic was, I was like, oh, I can make like a cool logo where there's like a Middle Eastern dude holding an eye of Ophidia in his hand, and he has an eye of Ophidia on him, and he's like an eye for an eye. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And I had an artist draw it up, and I got the rendition, and that's who the guy you voice acted was the artist rendition of like this Middle Eastern guy, and the original picture has him holding an eye in one hand and an eye in the other hand, and he's keeping one and giving you the other
Yeah.
one. So that was the whole like origin story of Hammurabi TCG.
I love it. I love it. That's so awesome. Yeah, I didn't even know that when I was watching it and voicing it. I mean, I was in the mind state of a North Jersey mobster, so I guess it wasn't exactly the same. But now, let's get to the fresh faves. I'm going to ask you a couple of your favorite things from the game, and hopefully you answer. And are you ready?
Sure.
First, who is your favorite hero?
Prism and Viscera. Viscera was my first. Prism was my first love, and now it's back to Viscera.
All right, fair answer. I'm sure Gary likes that one. Uh,
Oh yeah,
which weapon is your favorite?
my favorite weapon is Iris of Reality. It's just so awful and fantastic at the same time. You
I
look at it, and you're like, this is terrible, and then you play it, and you're like, oh, this is really good.
I mean, I'm loving those Iris Dromide decks that I'm saying. They are really
Oh
cool.
man, I took one of them to a pro quest, and I ended up going 4-2 and bubbled. But man, the face on Oldham players when you sit down, and you flip over the Iris instead of the Storm of the Sandakai. They're like, oh no.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty incredible. I mean, like Burn Them All is like so good in that deck. But
Oh
uh,
man,
which is your favorite equipment?
my favorite equipment would have to be Carrion Husk.
Hell yeah.
There was a bit where Viscerai was not good, and Chain had come out, and I was like, oh, let me learn how to play Chain. And I was like, man, this Husk is doing some work. And I just got like, oh, this is so great. And then I played some Levia and Skirmish, and I was like, this is really, really good.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the it's just there's no real nuance to Carrion Husk. It's just beefy.
No. The art is sick too. It's like a dead demon just was
Oh
like hanging
yeah,
out there, and it's just like, oh, it's awesome.
so sick. And which is your favorite run of the mill card? Your attack actions, your non-attack actions, your instants, the cards you throw in your deck.
My favorite card to throw into all my decks is Lead the Charge because I just feel like it's just at times it's just like really wonky, but it makes these like really crazy lines. Like in Viscerai with creepers, you can like flash it out and do really wonky things, and it just helps you do a bunch of cool things. And that's my favorite non-attack. My favorite attack I like to throw into decks is Ravenous Rabble. Like even if it should not belong, I'm just like it's free. Why not? Why not play it?
Yeah. You cut some extra blues and yellows out of the deck, throw it in there. You're hoping to hit
Yeah.
more reds than blues. I get it. I get it.
Uh,
Um, yeah. Well, thank you for doing the fresh trades. Those are good answers. I mean, I love the Carrion Husk answer because I'm a big Carrion Husk simp. So let's talk a little bit about the secondary market, right? Because you're involved in it, and something that I don't know a whole lot about. And then we'll answer some listener questions. But first, let's talk about the market. So there's no doubt that Flesh and Blood has ups and downs in the singles market. We've seen things go sky high, and then not necessarily rock bottom or anything like that, but we've seen things even out, right? So I thought, who better to comment on it than you? So how would you say the health of the market is currently?
I think the market is okay. If I were to give it a percentage, 1 to 100, I would say the market's at a 90% right now,
Okay.
the health wise. So it's pretty healthy. The only problem that I'm coming across now is that the demand is exceeding the supply. And this is specifically on older sets like Arc, like Crucible, like WTR now, in a sense, with the tunics and the hearts. There's so much demand, there's not enough supply. Like even as a store for me to get more product, or even for me as a store to buy singles, a lot of people don't want to sell their items, or they don't want to, or they don't have any to sell to begin with. So in that sense is where that 10% negativity is coming from, is that there's not enough supply, the demand that the game is growing, and the game is becoming more, which is what we all want as fat players. Like, we want our game to grow,
Yeah.
and that helps all of us because we get to play in bigger tournaments, we get to have better prize support, we get more people to play with, like more friends, like it's
Yeah.
fantastic. But the only problem is that there's just not enough supply. Like Crucible is the biggest issue, in my opinion. Like it's very difficult to fill Crucible of War singles. It's very hard to get Majestics from the set because there just no one has it, and anyone who has it, they're just wanting to like a premium for either sealed product or for the singles themselves because they're all like between like $5 and $10 and $15.
So are you finding that the history pack did not alleviate this problem?
Not at all,
Yeah.
because the history pack, if anything, is more short printed than the Crucible War set.
Interesting.
So when they released History Pack back in May of last year, the issue that they did was they didn't release it in like sizable ways. They trickled it out, but I'm not sure whose decision that was, whether it was LSS, distribution, or whoever, but that's what ended up happening. And a lot of stores, they got like 2 to 3 cases or 3 to 4 cases, and then they would get like a case or so a week going forward. But to meet the demand of a reprint set, like that's not enough. Like I'm sure like your Magic days when Modern Masters came out or those reprint sets came out, so they would get like a crap ton the first wave, and then they would get trickle effects after. There was still a sizable first wave, and then people
Mhm.
would open and sell and do that. But if there's not enough for people to open, then it becomes a problem. Like with Black Border History Pack, for example, where it wasn't large enough, and now all these collectors are buying it and they're opening it because you can get a Fabled and you can get these Marvel Heroes and this and that. But History Pack 1 never had that, so a lot of stores either kept it or it just never came out.
It's interesting. Now, what do you think they could do to alleviate this, right? We talked a little bit about like reprint stuff, but ARC, WTR, Crew are still from the era of Unlimited and First Edition. I know we've moved past it. We're in Fab 2.0, but do you think it would make sense for Flesh and Blood or LSS to was like, well, okay, it's still unlimited. We'll print just a little bit more. We'll just throw a little bit more. We'll print to a demand that the market's craving right now. Is that something smart, or is that kind of it could backfire?
Yeah. I feel like it could backfire in the sense that it's you're seeing that issue in Magic now, where like the reserve list and the Magic 30th thing, where it's like, oh, once you've crossed the word or crossed the line, it's hard to go back.
Mm-hmm.
So with LSS saying that WTR, Arc, and Crew are out of print, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, we're going to print more. Like I guess it could cause a lot of like fallout and a lot of collectors, a lot of players being like, like what the heck? I spent my $250 on a tunic, and now here you are making 100,000 more boxes and making my tunic less worth it, right? I think the appropriate way to handle it would be to either make a new reprint set and just have like a best of 2021 fab, like like one of those that's all you got music CDs from back in the day. Like just do that, have your greatest hits of that year, and just like have a reprint set, or more history pack. Like to be fair, if you print more history pack and have it more readily available for stores to get, where they can get like 10, 15, 20 cases, and they can crack some from singles and stuff like that and sell it, it can help alleviate that problem as well. It's something similar to what Fluke is doing in Australia. He was able to get a bunch of history pack and stuff like that, and he's cracking it so he can, sell singles and this white border singles to all the players in Australia that want them.
Sure. Now here's actually a thought here. Now that they've launched they've launched in Brazil, right? And they just launched in Japan, right? So those are some languages, I believe. I don't think Portuguese is a printed language, and Japanese is certainly not a printed language yet. Do you think that's a great opportunity for LSS to use that to reprint some stuff?
I think so. I think they should do a history pack localized for them. Like maybe do history pack 1 localized in Portuguese and in what's it called, in Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
I could see the Japanese happening more
Sure.
than the Portuguese would, just because the Portuguese market is just basically some African countries, Portugal and Brazil, right?
Yeah.
It's mostly that. The player base is large, but just building that product for 3 areas is that. But the Japanese market is always the biggest market, secondary to the U.S. when it comes to card games, because they love card games.
Yeah.
So I could see them doing the Japanese version first, because even then, a lot of American players covet Japanese, cards and stuff like that. Like I'm sure if they made like a Prism Marvel in Japanese, everyone here would go bonkers for it, and they would put down payments on their house just so they can get one.
Refinance their mortgages and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Oh my god. Yeah. It could be interesting. I'm interested to see what they do with that market in general. It's still very fresh there. So, is there anything that you worry about with the market in Flesh and Blood? I know that you've mentioned that there's some things that you worry about in the game health in general, but in the market, do you worry about any kind of, well, like a ban that might really, really crash a certain price of the card.
I think it's how they're treating some legendaries and stuff like that.
Hmm.
That's pretty much what all I can think of. Like buyouts happen, and they happen in every single thing in life, whether it's stocks, toilet paper during a pandemic, whatever. If people want to buy something and they see other people buying it, FOMO is going to kick in and they're going to buy it as well. It's just a way of life. So I'm indifferent to that. But when it comes to like banning legendaries and stuff like that, and I felt like they took a proper route. Like in the article that they released recently about their bans with Winter Well Hypothermia, they said that we don't want to have that feeling of you cracking your first legendary taken away from you because it's a banned legendary. And they said that with regards to Crown of Seeds. So if they tread in that way going forward, I can see it being beneficial.
Hmm.
Now, you don't really have to worry about that as much in the sense that a lot of the newer legendaries that come out are relatively cheaper than what the first 6 sets of legendaries were at release, right? Like Stalagmite at release was $265. Now it's sitting at a hot $40,
Yeah.
right? So it's it becomes less of a problem the more and more you go into the future and stuff like that because the sets are printed not in more, but more and more is being opened at release, which helps stabilize the price long term. Because the inverse was happening with WTR Art, Crew, Mon, and all those sets. Not much was open at release because everyone wanted to set aside their case and play Yahtzee with the future and be like, well, one day my case is going to be worth $2,000 and the Mon's going to go to 1K. But what that did was it created droughts in the supply in the market because no one was opening anything, so there's not enough singles to get it. And that's probably a reason why my store took off because no one else was opening singles except me and a few other select stores like Fab TCG Cards Jim
Hmm.
and a former store Midtown Merchant Mitch Murray. It was just us three basically opening cards, so that's probably why our three individual stores took off a little bit from there. Mitch unfortunately closed his store because he had more priorities in life and stuff like that, and that's what it is. But um, I think that was the main reason that the supply just was not there. And then going forward, if they address and they keep all these things in line, I think it should be pretty much fine. But it's just a concern how they walk the tightrope.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, something else that's kind of come up lately
Mhm.
was there's been more reports of counterfeits. Is this a concern for you, or do you think this is just a couple issue or instances of this happening, or is this something that we should worry about more as the game grows?
I think it's a problem of concern. So, for example, I had a friend of mine. He's a content creator. His name is Oliver Fi. He works. He has OKNY podcast. He posts like gameplay videos on YouTube and stuff like that. He had purchased a set of the, I believe they're Chinese Fate for scenes, the ones, the Happy New Year ones with the lunar cookie on it, and he had received a set. They ended up being fake. And me and him, we conversed because I had my own personal set, and we're like, let's compare them and see if it was fake or not. We ended up coming to the fact that his were fake and stuff
Hmm.
like that. So once you start seeing these high end premium chase cards, like the Fate 14s are $300, $400 each, start getting counterfeit, and the counterfeits were good enough to the point where reputable sellers were like looking at them and they're like, oh, this looks real enough, and
Wow.
it passes 90% of the test. Maybe the other 10% is just it got printed on a different sheet, it got printed at a different time. Maybe the printer got started running out of ink. Maybe he had an HP inkjet and the inkjet conked out. Like who knows, right?
Yeah.
So, like you got to account for those variations, but it looked good enough to pass. But that's kind of scary. Like for example, I wrote an email to LSS saying like, hey, this is a bunch of stuff I found. Do with it what you will, but they're making counterfeits, and I had purchased a set of them from him so I can use as reference material just in case I come across them. I can feel them and stuff like that. So like the issues that I found with them is that their fonts are not the same.
Mm.
So their bottom font, they're not able to replicate the same font that Fab does for
Okay.
some reason. It's the boldness of it, the thickness of it, but what they are able to replicate is the exact foiling. Like for example, on a heart, there's certain parts that are foil and certain parts that are not foil,
Oh
and you get
wow.
that shimmer effect when you hold it. And they were able to mimic that. Same thing on a Striders. Like on a Striders, the boot itself is not shiny, but the fire around it is shiny. So, and they were able to replicate that. So on those rainbow foils, it becomes an item of concern because you're just like, I don't know, and this and that, like, but it's just easier to tell from the card stock because a lot of the sets they were printed in Japan. That's the red tape boxes that people get,
Mm-hmm.
and the card stock is very easily distinguishable. And then, like for example, I got a shock charmer sent to me, and it was like not the Japanese stock, and the Japanese stock is where the unlimited rainbow foil comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd felt it, and it was fake because you could tell it's not that Japanese card stock. The coloring was not right, and
Wow.
I can mostly tell that because I've opened thousands of cases, and it's just like easier for me to handle because I've like held so many cards. I can be like that, but to the layman, it's just like it looks good enough, and then you end up getting negged on your purchase because you bought something for $60 that's not real.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's kind of scary, right? And I hope folks out there are kind of wary of it and think about where they're actually purchasing their singles, right? Because the singles market's great, right? It's awesome that you don't have to crack a bunch of boxes and roll the dice as us brute players like to do. But it's but you got to be careful. So I think kind of doing your due diligence in terms of like looking into where you're buying them. Sometimes if it's too good to be true, maybe it is too good to be true, right? So like that's something I hope that the buds kind of take away from that, right? So
There's something useful that store MinMax, based out of Chicago, they posted on their website, on Twitter, and some other places. They made an article highlighting how you can tell a fake from a real apart, like what a real card has that's like approved, and they have pictures and step by step where to look, what to look for, and everything. So I mean, like that's a great resource for new players and any players to use if you're making your high end purchase on the tunic, for you not to get gypped and you get sent a fake $20,
yeah.
Office Depot tunic, and now you're stuck with it. And, you're out of whatever money that you spent on it as well.
Yeah. I would implore the buds to check that out as well. MinMax is great. Now we got some listener questions, Himmel, if you're
Perfect.
into it.
I am down.
Oh yeah. This came from the Buds Discord, which anybody can join. Is free for everyone. It's in the show notes. And when I have guests on, typically if I have enough leeway, I will post a post for people to send in questions. We have some questions. So first comes from Pat Shaw, aka Pat Smash Good, who just started his a new YouTube channel. I hope it's Off the Rails TCG. Please check it out. He asks, "What is your take on the practice of a buyout?"
I think buyouts are completely fine, but it's going back to that tightrope analogy, but it's a tightrope. You don't want to create these artificial buyouts for no apparent reason, but you can see that it's beneficial in a way as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a good and a bad. It's like something that you need in the game to show health in the market, health and money and cash flow and stuff like that. But it's also bad in the sense that if it happens too frequently, you have more of a stock exchange than you do a card game.
Yeah.
So it's the real tightrope. Like for example, like Crosswrap. Skullbone Crosswrap was $45 to $50 for the longest time. Riptide and Azalea support got announced and it shot up to $75, $80. That's healthy because that's people and players buying in anticipation of the thing. And now we could retrace just like Mask of Momentum did when Fi got revealed. When Mask of Momentum shot up to $140, $150 when Fi got shown off during Uprising, and now it's sitting back at $90. Like these incremental climbs and retraces, I think, are healthy for the game because it shows that people are willing to spend money to play what they want in anticipation, excitement of something coming out, which shows that there's cash flow in the game. But the bad part is that once you get items and people buying out cards like tunics or defindals, like essential game pieces, rather than ancillary things to play a hero or whatever, then it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and Capolo actually kind of builds upon that, and he kind of answered it here. But he asked, do you think buyouts have a negative impact on new players trying to join the game? For example, Staples kind of getting to a unreasonable price, you hit the nail on the head, right? Sure, Skullbone Crosswrap, yeah, buy it out. It's like what?
Yeah.
It's a people are specking on it, and that's totally normal. But who needs like 20 spring tunics, right? Like
Yeah.
nobody, and so it's interesting. Flake actually asks here, what kind of speculating takes place when you're looking to invest in a low cost card? How do you evaluate when you buy a card under the premise it will hopefully rocket in value?
So the best example of something I did with this was Three of a Kind. So when Arcane Rising Unlimited came out, for a while before Tales of Aria came out, Three of a Kind was a $2 card, $1 card. Azalea was not good, and Azalea actually didn't play Three of a Kind because she can only shoot one arrow a turn. This is before Tri-Shot, before all those cards came out. So it was just one arrow a turn, one big arrow, and that's it. So Three of a Kind was a dumpster fire Majestic. So I looked at what essentially I like to look at as a power level of the Majestic. This is like some YuGiOh thinking going into it, but I can explain it and break it down. So I look at, does the card enable you to do things, or does the card give you the ability to enable other things to do things? So, for example, Three of a Kind both enables you to do multiple things, plus enables you to enable other cards to do things. In the sense, like if you have Voltaire with Lexi, you're able to Three of a Kind and get yourself 2 arrows to shoot, plus the resources. Plus, it also lets you do more things. So when you see power levels of cards like that, like Three of a Kind, for example, Rain Razors, for example, Pulverize is like a finisher, for example, Snag, like you said yourself, looking into future where you see a lot of Rangers and Assassins pumping up their attacks, Snag could play an integral part. So I look at those for class specific cards to spec on, and then for generics, I just like to spec on generics in general because there's not that many generic M's in this game. I think there's about 15 or 20 of them if you count the supers.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, it's not hard for you to spec on a couple of these generic M's because not only are they playable in all the decks, they can go and do that. Like for example, one that I spec'd on was That's All You Got. That's All You Got. I was like, this is a yellow cost defense reaction, so you can pitch it for resources, worst case, and you can do swings. Plus, it draws you a card. So the power level is there, it replaces itself. So it's basically a free card. So if any card becomes a free card, then you can see the potential of it becoming busted down the line. So that was another card I spec'd out, and I bought 50 to 100 copies of from secondary markets and stuff like that, but incrementally, so not to trigger a buyout, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then when the card shot up from the $3 price tag it was at to like $7, $8, $10 it is now. It's the the future side that you're able to make your penny stocks basically on the card.
Hey, listen, it makes sense, and actually, it's funny enough. Flake asked that question. That All You Got was Flake's spoiler card from that set.
Oh man, it worked out. Funny story with Flake though. So I bought Flake's Outsider mat from the Wreck Havoc one from Indy,
mm-hmm.
and we kept missing each other because he was coming by the booth to drop it off, and I had to pay him the money. And we just kept missing each other. And James Silver, he hangs out with Pheno Black,
mm-hmm.
and so I told him, I was like, hey man, if you see Flake, just let him know I'm looking for him. So he went to go to the bathroom, and he runs into Flake, and he just sells at the top. It's like, hey, Hemals looking for you. While Flake's using the bathroom, and then Flake saw he looked like he had a ghost go through.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, if there's anyone that's used to people just shouting at him, it is Flake. Next week, my co-host from the Bud Rush Bell and our mutual friend Gary asked 2 questions. Does Hammurabi really have the juice? And what is the best restaurant to visit in Texas?
Oh man. So Hammurabi does have the juice. We sell carrot, celery, tomato, and all other juices for all vegetables. We call it a V8, but for copyright reasons, we call it a V9. But the best restaurant to visit in Texas, I'll narrow it down to 3 or 3 different types of people who like 3 different types of foods. For steak, I'm a fan of B&B Butchers. B&B Butchers is a steakhouse here in Houston. You get to go there. You get to pick out your cut of meat from the butcher. The butcher cuts it up. You tell them exactly how you want it cooked, what do you want on it, and they bring the steak to you, and it's always perfect. Their sides are amazing. Their drink selection's amazing. They have an old fashioned cart that they bring to your table, and
Ooh,
they make the old fashioned at the table.
like that.
Amazing service. Then the second place I like is this for those people who like sushi. There's a place here called Uchi. Uchi is like this very high end sushi place in a way, but it's very fancy in a way. And they have an omakase menu in a private room where you can have a 15-course private dinner where it's just you and whoever you bring in your party, kind of like a hibachi, but the hibachi is by itself. The chef is in front of you making the sushi and
Ooh,
hanging it out one by one. It's an experience. And the last place is my craze. As you can tell, I'm Indian, and I love me some good Indian food.
of
There's an
course.
Indian restaurant here in Houston called Nirman's. Best food I've ever had for Indian restaurant from a takeout restaurant. You get a good naan, you get a good curry, you get some good meat. They make some good samosas. Bomb.
Oh man. Oh man. That's like that's my dream, right? So I got to go to
Oh yeah,
Houston. It sounds like. Uh,
come through, man. I'll take you around.
I do have two more questions here. One from Greg, Big Dick Jones in the Discord. Which hero would you take in a fist fight?
I would take personally. I would take Reinar because
Whoa.
before he even starts the fight, he intimidates.
Yeah.
Right, so they're already at a disadvantage, right? Oldham, my dude needs a Tylenol before he moves. Although, I guess, but I'm sticking with Reinar because he got that beast within, he got that blood rush bellow. He's about to massacre some people.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
Yeah. I'll take that. Now, Papa Mike asks, should I bite the bullet and buy surgical extraction? Or do you think LSS will do some kind of reprint to make up for the short printing of it?
Personally, I think they're gonna do one thing to fix this. So they said they mixed them up. They mixed up surgical and regicide. Regicide was supposed to show up at the rate surgical showed up because it's legendary. And surgical, the rate regicide showed up, which was, it showed up way too much, personally speaking. I
Yeah.
cracked over 150 cases of Dynasty. I'm in so much pain by the amount of regicides I've pulled.
I have so many.
But I would, I would personally take the bullet and bite the bullet and purchase it because I think they can only fix it in one of two ways. I don't think they'll reprint it, at least for a while,
Mm-hmm.
because it causes a lack of faith in the product, right? Because the product just came out and now you're immediately reprinting it.
Yeah.
So all these people who have invested money, all these people who are buying product, all these people, you're removing a chase card less than 6 months from the set's release, which can be kind of painful for a lot of people to swallow, and it leaves a bad taste in a lot of players' mouth. But thanks to Fab 2.0, they can do one thing. They can release a second wave
Mm-hmm.
with the printing fixed. And then just be like, hey, we're releasing a second wave. The printing is fixed on it. It's still Dynasty, Fab 2.0. So you can, if you open these, you get them pulled at a much easier rate. And that will naturally cause that surgical extractor price to go slower and lower as more and more of that second wave is open, rather than just creating a reprint being like, well, you don't need to worry about that set anymore because that surgical extraction is a moot point. You
Yeah.
just have focus on your own product still, but you fix the problem.
There you go. Bye, Mike. Yeah, this has been great, Hemel. This is a lot of fun because, well, you're awesome and you're a great bud, and I think you do bring a lot of wealth of knowledge, and it's backed up not on just nothing, right? You play the game, you understand the game, right? You understand what's going on with Flesh and Blood. So I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. I wanted to say that. And I would like for you to plug anything you'd like to plug. And thank you.
Oh yeah, man. Appreciate you having me on. I hope I didn't talk all y'all's ear off, man, because I'm known as a big talker. But yeah, check me out on Twitter at hpat612. I take orders all over social media and stuff like that. On Facebook, just find me Hemal Patel on all the marketplace, the references groups, all the fab groups. I'm pretty much there. On Discord, check out Incarnate Zeus 5409. Hit me up there for any of your card singles needs, and at any of your events. If you see me in person, come say hi, and let me set you up with some deals on some decks you need. But that's pretty much it. And I'll be getting a website up soon. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist when it comes to it, so I want to make sure it's like the best before I launch it. So that's why it's taking a little bit of time. But hopefully, by Outsiders, maybe the summer set, I'll have it fully locked and loaded and out there for people to just head to HammurabiTCG.com.
No, sweet. And if you need something, the Bazaar will have it.
Mm-hmm.
You all can continue to find me on Twitter at FreshBudsPod. Like, comment, subscribe on the YouTube. 500 subscribers, doing full adult Levia cosplay. Gary will be the rabbit she killed. What else? Discord, Bud's Discord, check it out. Patreon, check that out as well. And we already talked a little food, Hemel, earlier, but I still want to end the show just talking about some food. I want you to tell me, you've traveled a lot for this game, right? Doing all these callings and all that stuff. What is, off the top of your head, what is the best meal you've had traveling for this game?
When I went to Dallas for the calling, there was a pizza place that was right next to the convention center called Zalat Pizza, Zalat. They have a pepperoni pizza, 16 inches, called a Pepperoni Masterclass.
Whoa.
By far the best pizza I've had in my entire life. It's New York style.
Okay.
It beats New York pizza any day. And I've been in New York several times, and I've had that pizza, and I've never had a pizza as good as that pizza in my entire life.
All right.
So next time anyone's in Dallas, check it out.
Oh, it sounds very good. I am hungry. Everybody, please have a good week.